Hey everyone, welcome back to the Strategic UTXO. My name is Matt, and in this video, we're going to cover what happened with the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve announcement last week. I know we're a little delayed on this, but I want to talk about what went into the announcement. We'll review what the actual executive order says, and then we'll see, what this means for the market moving forward, because it's pretty massive news. And unfortunately, Bitcoin sold off. So we're going to now analyze what happened and see if we can try to figure out how it's going to impact Bitcoin's price moving forward. But before we get into talking about the SBR, I have a newsletter called the Strategic UTXO, and you can sign up for it by becoming a premium member in the link in the description below. The newsletter comes out twice a week, and you have 2 premium private videos that are released with it, where we look at macro and Bitcoin and analyze what is going on in the world of Bitcoin and general markets. So if that interests you, check it out in the description below. Okay, before we dive into what actually is in the executive order that outlines what the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve is going to be, I want to look at the market structure over the past 2 weeks. And we're on a 4-hour chart right here. And we can see once we broke, we kind of zoom out. This is the $89,000 level. It's actually 91. The $89,000 level that I have been keeping an eye on is right here. When we broke it to the downside, initially, this is when I got kind of bearish and cautious in the short term. We plummeted all the way down to $78,000. That was our first bottom. Then we came back up and put in a lower high, at least relative to this previous one, which itself was also a lower high. And when you're repeatedly putting in these lower highs, what that means is it's a bearish sentiment. It's a bearish chart pattern because the market is not able to get the price above the previous high that was set only, a week or two ago, which shows that there are more sellers than buyers. People are cashing out in these pumps. All right. So then you have your correction. People realize that it's just kind of a pump to exit out of. And then early in the week on Monday, we got speculation about the crypto summit that was taking place in DC. Saylor was going to be there. Brian Armstrong was there. A couple other people from massive public Bitcoin companies were in attendance, and as well as Treasury Secretary Bessent, Trump, and his Crypto Czar David Sacks. And so finally, there was this massive green candle on Tuesday when people were speculating about this SBR announcement that was going to come early. People were expecting it to come in July after the commission from the president, and then ultimately it came here in early March, which is phenomenal. And so we had this pump back from 81,000 all the way to 92,000, a $10,000 run in about 3 days. And then after we hit about 92,000, started to sell off again, had a pump on the initial news, and then we absolutely just dumped afterwards to a new bottom, our bottom number 2 of $76,000. And as you can see, there's kind of been overall weakness in market. So if we look at the S&P 500, it has just been straight down since the end of February. Let's check what the size of this retracement is. It's been basically a perfect 10%. So people were buying this 10% dip down here. So the market has had a general correction, right? Run-of-the-mill correction. And Bitcoin was kind of front-running this correction here. And then it bounced early. And then you have the speculation with the crypto summit that kind of interrupted the general downtrend. And that's when we had this return to market weakness. Now, too early to call what is going on here with this price action. This seems rather constructive, although it may not be the final flush that we're expecting. But having a double bottom makes a lot of sense for where we're at. So I could see either a short-term rebound or even some longer-term strength coming from this region. So that's what happened with the price action. And the question is why? People were thinking that the SBR would be this massive announcement because it starts the, quote unquote, nation state adoption and game theory is kicking in. And I often kind of mock those ideas on X, although there is a shred of truth to them. The US coming out with a very clear policy about holding Bitcoin as a strategic asset or strategic reserve, or holding the asset in a strategic reserve, communicates to the world, hey, this is something that you should look into. And so I don't think you're going to see like the dominoes falling in the next few weeks of other SBRs popping up around the world. But I think this is a decade-long process, and it's very bullish long-term, very bullish long-term. And if you're an American, it's great to be excited about. Now, there are some questions about, the Silk Road coins they're probably going to hang on to, but what, the question surrounds the Bitfinex coins. So they originally had around 200,000 coins. Will they be able to keep all 200,000? That will be the question. But okay, if we go to CNN Business, they had this article kind of outlining or explaining the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, the one thing that just bothers me a little bit, and I know I hate to nitpick, but in the title they say Bitcoin strategic reserve, and then in their first like subtitle they say the strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? A BSR versus an SBR. And I just want to set the record straight. You know, I'm not sure how many people are going to watch this, but the US has strategic reserves, not a, you know, the noun and then the strategic reserve. So we have a strategic grain reserve, a strategic cheese reserve, a strategic national stockpile, the SPR, the petroleum reserve, the strategic natural gas reserve, right? So when you hear people talking about this Bitcoin reserve, it is a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And it's not a Bitcoin strategic reserve. That doesn't make any sense. But you see people saying that all over Twitter and even in interviews and all over. So it's a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And I know I'm nitpicking, but that is slightly important. If we're going to talk about this on the same level as an SPR or a national a strategic and natural gas stockpile reserve, it's important that we use it in that phrase because it's within the branding and the reserves that the U.S. has that are strategic stockpiles of very important resources and assets. You can talk about our strategic gold reserve at Fort Knox, right? So that's important. Strategic Bitcoin reserve. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at what this SBR, what is it actually? What's in this executive order? And this is only like, I mean, maybe a page and a half. So there's not a lot of stuff for it. I highlighted a few things I want to review. The first is the background. The fact that you are seeing this coming out of the White House of the strongest nation on the planet is incredible. This line right here, the Bitcoin protocol permanently caps the total supply of Bitcoin at 21 million coins and has never been hacked. That's very important. The protocol itself, the network itself has never been hacked. You can have hacks, within a website or an exchange that is external to the Bitcoin supply. As a result of its scarcity and security, Bitcoin is often referred to as digital gold. Because there is a fixed supply of Bitcoin, there is a strategic advantage to being among the first nations to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So being first, which is so key, this is why many people, including myself, were championing this idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, is that being first has so many benefits. Now, we want them to buy Bitcoin, but holding on to what they have and at least committing to not selling it because there were rumors that the previous administration was starting to sell off some of the coins that was under the U.S. Marshal Service. This is key. Not only are they not selling, they are recognizing the strategic nature of the reserve. Okay, the strategic nature of Bitcoin and wanting to put that into a reserve. All right, now the policy. And again, people were talking about a sell the news event. If we even go back to, sorry, I didn't even finish this, the CNN article, right? A lot of crypto investors would have preferred a more aggressive approach to buying Bitcoin, not just repurposing the government stash. Although that's true, everybody that I talked to that knows what's going on, nobody expected this from an executive order, right? Anything, and I'll show you the bonus that we see in the actual reserve. But what we actually got was pretty much as good as we could expect from an executive order. If we want a real substantial buying plan that needs to come from Loomis's bill out of Congress, which I'm not super bullish on, getting out in the next 18 months, which it would need to before the midterms. But unfortunately, that would be the way that we have a structural buying program. So what we saw was a buy the hype, buy the rumor, sell the news. It's a very classic pattern in markets, right? You buy the rumor down here as people are starting to get excited. And then once it actually happens, unless it's a fundamental change to the market, like the ETFs were, it's a sell the news event, which I guess the ETFs were a sell the news event, then ultimately a rebound. The structure actually looks very similar to what we have here. So this is what was so bullish. Even when we had these rumors at the beginning of the week that people were getting excited about, the idea was that it was going to be a strategic crypto reserve, right? You have Bitcoin and then the rest. If I pull up what the US government owns, you can see that they hold a lot of these coins or digital assets or whatever you want to call them. By far, the largest holding is Bitcoin. 198,000 Bitcoin worth $16 billion. The rest, you have $100 million worth of ETH. You have 23 million of BNB, which is really the only, there's no Sol, there's no Cardano, ADA, there's no, what was the other one? XRP. They don't own any of these things, right? Now, the point is that these are much smaller in value compared to Bitcoin. So even if there was a crypto strategic reserve and they just kind of take the confiscated tokens and they put it into this pile, It's not that big of a deal, right? It's not what we wanted. But what we got here was a separation. We got a digital asset stockpile, which is basically just a commitment not to sell, and a strategic Bitcoin reserve that puts it on the level of the gold reserves, of the SPR, of the natural gas reserves. And when they come out and give this background of it having actual strategic value from a nation state perspective is key. Like so far, Section 1 and Section 2 blew us out of the park. We're not expecting this. Okay, this is why, see that I highlighted, this is why this executive order was actually so bullish. The Secretary of the Treasury, that's Bessent, and the Secretary of Commerce, that's Lutnick, shall develop strategies for acquiring additional government Bitcoin, provided that such strategies are budget neutral and do not impose incremental costs on the United States taxpayers. Now, this is kind of an accounting thing. It's very important, right, to have just an all-around political win here. People are already nervous about the debt. Now, whether those concerns are properly founded or not, we can debate another time. But the point is, it would be politically unpopular to say that we're just going to be buying Bitcoin, without having a source of something else that it's coming from. So this net neutral buying plan, whether you sell gold, whether you revalue some gold certificates, whether you sell off a few government buildings and repurpose that cash, or whether you use the exchange stabilization fund to maybe fund a few $1 billion worth of purchases, this gives some flexibility for the US government, the executive branch, to buy Bitcoin outside of the purview of the legislative branch, which is much harder to get, a bill passed through both houses, so both chambers. So that's incredibly bullish. Also, too, I want to point out, not a lot of people have been talking about this. Within 60 days of the order, Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, shall deliver an evaluation of the legal and investment considerations for establishing and managing the SPR, including the accounts in which the SPR shall be located. Right. So this will probably be at Coinbase if we assume the ETFs want to use Coinbase for their custody. It's likely that Brian Armstrong is going to win this government contract here. Not the end of the world. I think there's, El Salvador has self-custody of their own. That would come with Loomis's bill. But the fact that we know that they're not selling it, they view the strategic nature of it, and they potentially might buy more without Congress. Like, that is incredibly bullish long term. And this is the part that shows the world that they're serious. They're doing some political maneuvering, some political theater here, right? These net neutral purchases to appease all sides of the aisle and all taxpayers, regardless of red or blue. But it's signaling to the rest of the world. Now, it's not going to have like an immediate pump, but this is really important for the long term that they are actually serious. So this line, the separation of the crypto and Bitcoin, and then the background of how they see Bitcoin, how they view it from a strategic perspective is so key. So this is what they hold right now, right? The 198K. I think it showed total balances. Let's look at this. It did show that back in 2022 they held 236,000 Bitcoin, so they're down about 38,000. And I'm trying to remember the reason for that, but they do all sorts of consolidations in their transactions. But it's hilarious. If you scroll to the bottom of the portfolio here, and I'm sorry if you can't really see this. I wonder if I can zoom in. Here we go. If you look at the bottom of like these tokens of like Minky Toyn and Bets and Pig and Y token and Shaka token and Pepe Musk, they're all worth a zero. So these are like just civil or criminal baby Trump or criminal forfeitures, where they just basically take these assets, and you can see that they're literally worth nothing. $2.96 all the way up to 16 billion. And so over time, all these digital assets, all these crypto coins and whatever else, they're all going to go to zero against Bitcoin. And so this is overall super bullish. So where do we see the price headed from here? Unfortunately, right now, Bitcoin is going to be impacted by macro. And if you want to know how macro and liquidity are doing, you just have to look at the stock market. You look at the S&P 500. Let's see, what was this? Where did we bottom right about here? So we took out the July highs and we went even lower for a clean 10% correction. I could see a bounce happening here. I don't know if it's a full-blown recovery. I'm not sure if we see all-time highs until maybe Q3, Q4. Consider, nobody knows what the future is going to hold, but if we're trying to read the tea leaves here, I don't know how strong Bitcoin is going to be in an environment when stocks are not at all-time highs and pushing to new all-time highs, which not a lot of people know. That's usually what happens. The stock market spends most of its time pushing into new all-time highs. So it'll get back to that eventually. But in the meantime, with everything going on in the world, I think we could continue to see some chop. I think we could get back into the 90s. I think we could see 100 again. But until, and we talked about this in the Strategic UTXO Premium newsletter, which you guys should sign up for, what we are really looking for is a close above. Oh, I want the 1 day. My camera's in the way. Can't see what I'm clicking. All right, put myself back. I want to see a close above this 50-day moving average, which if you can see in the top right corner is 94,000 all the way up here. Once we get a close above 94,000, that's when I will consider turning from being cautious to being structurally bullish. But as we get closer and as we kind of digest the price action that we're seeing, we'll talk about that more in future videos. So that's all I have for you guys right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.